I never thought that moving to another country could be so challenging. My wife Lisa and I had always dreamed of starting a new life in America, but the reality turned out to be far less rosy than we had imagined. The first weeks in our new place were filled with endless hassles, finding housing, getting documents in order, trying to find work. Lisa, seeing my confusion and fatigue, suggested inviting her mom Helen to live with us for the first time. "She'll help us settle in, look after the house while we're finding our place in this new country," my wife persuaded me. I wasn't thrilled with the idea, but I didn't argue. After all, families should stick together, especially in difficult times. Helen arrived a week after our conversation with her, a slim, well-groomed woman in her 50s with a neat haircut and a piercing gaze of brown eyes. That's how I saw my mother-in-law for the first time since my wedding to Lisa 5 years ago. She hugged her daughter, kissed her, and only then turned her attention to me. "Tom, nice to see you again. I hope you're taking good care of my girl." Helen looked me up and down appraisingly, and I felt a little uncomfortable. I tried to hide my awkwardness behind a broad smile and assured her that Lisa was the most important person in my life. With Helen's arrival, life in our house noticeably livened up. My mother-in-law took over all the household chores, cooking, cleaning, laundry. Everything was done by her hands. Lisa was happy to have her mom around, and I could only thank fate for such unexpected help. However, even then I began to notice that Helen was paying too much attention to me. She would adjust my shirt collar, give me an extra helping at dinner, or smile meaningfully, looking me straight in the eye. I put it down to her friendly nature and tried not to attach any importance to it. Weeks passed, and Lisa and I gradually settled into our new place. I found a job at a local auto repair shop, and Lisa got a job as an administrator at a hotel. Life seemed to be getting better, but Helen's presence in our house was starting to weigh me down. At first, I couldn't understand what was wrong, until one day I caught my mother-in-law off guard. I came home from work earlier than usual and found Helen in the kitchen wearing only a light robe. Seeing me, she wasn't embarrassed. On the contrary, she gave me a radiant smile. "Tom, you're home already? I was just about to take a shower. Would you like to scrub my back?" My mother-in-law winked at me playfully and disappeared into the bathroom. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, feeling my cheeks burning. Was she flirting with me? From that day on, I began to notice that Helen was increasingly finding herself next to me. She would accidentally touch me with her hand, give me a meaningful look, or start asking about my life with poorly hidden interest. I was becoming more and more uncomfortable in her presence, but I didn't know how to react to her behavior. I couldn't offend my mother-in-law with a rude refusal, but I certainly wasn't going to encourage her. Lisa also began to notice some tension in my relationship with Helen. One night at dinner, she asked if her mom and I had had a fight. "No, of course not, honey. What makes you think that?" I tried to answer as nonchalantly as possible. My wife looked at me intently, but said nothing. I felt ashamed for having to deceive the woman I loved. With each passing day, the tension grew. Helen became more and more persistent in her attentions, and I felt more and more awkward and helpless. Thoughts of my mother-in-law wouldn't leave me alone. I knew I had to put an end to her harassment, but I couldn't imagine doing it without destroying the fragile peace in our family. One day, Helen and I were left alone at home. Lisa had gone to visit her friend in a neighboring city. I tried to avoid my mother-in-law, but she found me herself. Entering the living room with 2 glasses of wine, Helen sat down on the couch next to me. "To our friendship!" She raised her glass, urging me to clink with her. I automatically took a sip, feeling my heart begin to beat faster at Helen's closeness. My mother-in-law moved closer, her hand resting on my knee. "You know how much you mean to me, Tom," she whispered, looking me straight in the eye. I should have stopped her, should have said that this was all wrong. But the fatigue of loneliness in a foreign country, the alcohol in Helen's gentle voice, did their job. When her lips touched mine, I returned the kiss. Passion clouded my mind and we lost ourselves in each other's arms. But reality quickly made itself felt. The next morning, waking up in bed next to my mother-in-law, I felt a sharp pang of shame and remorse. What had I done? How could I do this to Lisa? Helen, noticing my state, tried to reassure me, saying that what had happened was not a mistake but a manifestation of our true feelings. But that didn't make it any easier. From that day on, Helen and I became lovers. Snatching moments secretly, We would meet to indulge in forbidden passion. I hated myself for this weakness, but I couldn't help myself. Helen lured me like a drug, making me forget about moral principles and marital duty. Lisa seemed to be starting to suspect something. Several times she almost caught Helen and me in a compromising situation, but we always managed to pretend that nothing was happening. I knew I was playing with fire and would eventually get burned, but I couldn't stop. The truth came out in the most terrible way. One evening, Lisa came home earlier than usual and found Helen and me in bed. On her face, I saw shock, pain, and disbelief. "How could you, Tom? How could you both do this to me?" she screamed, choking on her tears. I jumped out of bed, trying to explain myself, but the words sounded pitiful and fake. And what could I say? That I was tempted by the availability of my own mother-in-law? That I was lonely in a new country? All my arguments seemed insignificant in the face of Lisa's suffering. Helen also looked shocked. She tried to hug her daughter, but Lisa angrily pushed her hands away. "Don't touch me! You betrayed me, Mom! You destroyed my family!" Lisa paced the room like a wounded animal, unable to believe what had happened. The next few days turned into hell. Lisa refused to listen to any explanations. She just cried for hours on end. I knew I had inflicted a terrible trauma on her, but I had no idea how to fix it. My apologies sounded hollow. My pleas for forgiveness only fueled her anger. Helen also looked grief-stricken. "What have I done? How could I ruin my own daughter's life?" she repeated through tears. But it was too late to change anything. Our family had cracked at the seams, and I didn't know if we would ever be able to glue the pieces back together. The following weeks were filled with pain and soul-searching. Lisa and I barely spoke to each other. Every conversation turned into an exchange of reproaches and accusations. Lisa demanded that I choose, her or Helen. But was that a choice? I loved my wife and didn't want to lose her. However, my feelings for Helen, however wrong they might be, did not disappear. My mother-in-law was also going through a difficult time. She fully realized the tragedy she had brought to our family and blamed herself for a moment of weakness. "I have to leave so you can fix everything," she told me one day with tears in her eyes. I wanted to object, to ask her to stay, but I knew it would be selfish of me. Lisa also thought a lot about what had happened. I could see how she was struggling, trying to decide if she could forgive me and her mother for the betrayal. "I love you, Tom, but I don't know if I can ever trust you again," she told me one evening. Her words cut to the heart, but I knew I deserved them. The denouement came unexpectedly. One day, Helen simply packed her things and left, leaving a letter on the table. "My dear ones, I have caused you pain that I cannot atone for. The only thing I can do is leave and give you a chance to make things right. Forgive me if you can. I love you," her note ended. Lisa and I sat in the kitchen for a long time rereading these lines. Tears streamed down our faces, washing away the resentments and misunderstandings. For the first time in a long time, we talked openly and honestly, trying to figure out how we would live on. I knew that the path to forgiveness and trust would be long, but for the sake of our love, I was ready to go all the way. Helen's departure was a turning point for our family. Lisa and I took a long time to recover from what had happened, learning to trust each other again. It wasn't easy, but gradually our relationship began to improve. The wound inflicted by my betrayal slowly healed, leaving a barely noticeable scar. Many years have passed since those events. Lisa and I managed to save our family, albeit at the cost of considerable effort. We never heard from Helen again. She seemed to have dissolved into the past. Sometimes I think of her with sadness and regret, but these feelings pale in comparison to the love and gratitude I feel for my wife. Lisa gave me a second chance, and I will do everything never to let her down again.